Hello, everyone, and welcome to the official Team 10 podcast. My name is Casey, and I'm joined here by my friends Michelly and Melissa, and this is going to be about the mangroves of Florida. Now, I know what you're thinking, guys. Mangroves? Who really cares? Well, the reason why we care is because we're going to make ourselves smarter. Let's start off with the 4 different species of mangroves that constitute 600,000 acres along the Florida coastline. It's going to be red, black, white, and buttonwood. We include buttonwood even though it's not actually a true mangrove, but it grows close to the true mangroves, and so is closely associated with it. Now, through our research and the wonderful people of the Florida State Parks organization, also taught us that these are the only trees in the world that can tolerate salt water, surviving in saline and brackish waters on the coast, mudflats, and riverbanks. Now, while there's a lot of trees that can tolerate living near it, this one can actually tolerate suspended periods of time in that salt water. So you might have seen these plants before and think, man, these are pretty crazy looking. And we totally agree. But even crazier is their importance. My friend Michelly here is going to explain to us a little bit more about their importance to the ecosystem.
Hey Casey, I absolutely can give you everything you need to know about the importance of these mangrove forests. Let me start with the most obvious one that benefits the people of Florida, and that would be storm surge protection. Florida is no stranger to hurricanes. While we were conducting our research, we recently were affected by Hurricane Ian. This hurricane caused major flash floods and catastrophic destruction. Some would agree that if we had mangroves, it wouldn't have been that bad. Mangrove forests can help us protect from hurricanes like Ian. They have pneumatophores and prop roots that are reddish, tangled, and aerial, which anchor down into the ground, reducing water flow and erosion. With these prop roots, mangrove forests act like a natural barrier that heavily slows down even some of the strongest of storms that Florida has had to face. Now, of course, with big storms comes an influx of seawater. Mangrove forests come in handy once again because they can filter out about 90% of the salt and pollutants that come from seawater through their roots. Salt can also be excreted through glands in their waxy leaves, forming a dried salt crystal on top of them. If you were to lick a mangrove forest leaf, it would actually taste salty. However, they serve economic values as well. Mangrove forests act as a nursery for wildlife. They are feeding and breeding grounds for different species of fish and wildlife. While humans, especially us Floridians, love to eat those delicious fish, like shrimp, that hang out and live in these mangroves. Now you're probably thinking, whatever, probably a small industry, probably doesn't mean much.
I know with this insanely large coastline, we probably do have at least, a pretty decent sized industry.
You're right. Fishing in the mangroves is a billion-dollar industry. It provides hundreds of jobs here in the state. We're talking 75% of the game fish in South Florida rely on mangroves for at least part of their life cycle. That is huge and puts into perspective how reliant the industry is on the mangrove forest. Tourism and recreation is big in Florida, and mangroves play a part in that too. Take a listen to this sound clip right here. The sounds of the forest are so tranquil and peaceful. You can really hear the presence of the wildlife in the sound clip, especially by bird populations. People go all over the state to experience the infamous mangrove forests that grow along most of the coastal peninsula and parts of the panhandle. The importance of these mangrove forests to their native state cannot be overemphasized. Like many natural things in our world today, they undergo some serious issues. Here to talk about these issues is my friend Melissa. Melissa, what kind of problems are mangroves facing due to natural and man-made causes?
Those are some pretty intimidating sounds. And if you're the wildlife that live in mangrove forests, unfortunately, there's sounds that you've probably become used to hearing. The tearing down of urban development and the mighty roar of hurricane winds, 2 destructive forces out of numerous that mangroves face. According to Moreau and Mitch's study on mangrove creek restoration, they found that urban development significantly altered the natural flow of water between grafted root systems of mangrove trees. A grafted root system is simply the connection between different mangroves through the fusion of their roots. This alteration of water flow can actually cause an accumulation of waste products in the roots, and it can decrease the amount of nutrients supplied to the roots, which turns out to be the primary reason for mangrove deterioration in South Florida. Now, despite what you would expect from the power of hurricane winds, researchers used data collected from NASA during Hurricane Irma and found that hurricane-force winds aren't what's directly causing damage to mangroves. Storm surge and trapped seawater are actually the culprits. See, the mangroves and low-lying in the seawater, and while mangroves can survive for a short time in this environment, eventually they dry out and die off. Agricultural practices that produce runoff are full of herbicides, and these herbicides seep through the roots of mangroves, poisoning them. Herbicides have become an essential part of farming because they help produce higher crop yields. But unfortunately, the effects they have on the environment can be severe and far-reaching. An increasing human population leads to an increase in herbicides, and this leads to a decrease in mangroves. The effects of climate change on mangroves can't be ignored either. Climate change is a consistent process that occurs over a long period of time. It causes sea levels to rise, and when they do, mangrove forests become flooded. This creates an imbalance of freshwater and saltwater concentrations, leading to the desiccation of mangroves.
Real quick, I am glad you brought up climate change because the United States is known as the largest contributor to it. And as a country, obviously we do need to do better. But, considering that, I would assume that Florida is actually in a much better situation because of all of these mangrove forests that we have and the abundance of all the other plant matter we have.
Yeah, mangroves are really helping to reduce the carbon footprint in Florida simply because of how much carbon dioxide they actually absorb. The mangroves in Florida capture approximately 6.4 billion metric tons of carbon per year, and they store this in their roots. Now, obviously, with deforestation occurring rapidly in Florida, our carbon footprint is getting increasingly more damaging. It's estimated that between 2000 and 2015, there was up to 200 million tons of carbon released due to the deforestation of mangroves. I know it's hard to understand the full impact of this, but that's an extraordinary amount of carbon.
Not to mention the fact that us Floridians are breathing this air, and we are actively making our air more dirty and inhaling it, which obviously has to be horrendous to our health. But let's also bring this back, a step back to the hurricanes before mangrove forests do reduce the impact that hurricanes apply onto us. So pretty much, everyone in this field does know about Louisiana and the habitat destruction that went on there and the kind of issues that they've been dealing with because of it, especially in New Orleans. So we know that, the deforestation of the mangrove forest damages the sort of marine life that live in it and, call it home. But what other effects does this have on humans exactly?
Turn on the news and you'll see the struggle that Florida is still currently undergoing because of Hurricane Ian, even weeks after it made landfall. They scenes of intense flooding that occurred in Fort Myers, Orlando, Daytona, and surrounding areas. The amount of storm surge and flooding that occurred shows just how important mangroves are to Florida's coastline. In fact, reports have shown that the complex root structure of mangroves inhibits water flow and effectively protects low-lying areas, not only from everyday waves and minor flooding events, but also from catastrophic storm surge like those created by hurricanes. One of the guidelines from the Wetlands International and the Nature Conservancy supports the planting and maintenance of mangrove belts up to 500 meters wide or more, or ideally thousands of meters wide. More mangroves equates to more protection. Mangroves are known for being resilient. They're able to adapt to soils that don't have oxygen and to daily flooding from incoming tides. These trees know how to survive in harsh conditions that most vegetation wouldn't have a chance in. They play such an important supporting role in the production of high biodiversity and high biomass in their communities. It almost sounds as though they're super shrubs, surviving on so little and yet dependent upon by so many. But they're susceptible to deterioration and death just like any other life form. Luckily, these amazing trees are getting a helping hand when they need it most. Past conservation programs and current ones have improved their efforts towards preventing further damage to mangroves. And studies have shown success rates in the mitigation of these issues and the possibility of fixing them long term. To help discuss these programs is my friend Michelly. Michelly, what approaches are being taken in order to meet these issues head on? And can you expand on the conservation programs that have been created to protect Florida's mangroves?
Hi, Melissa. There are a few current implementations set in place to help fix the issue. Restoring mangrove forests that have been devastated by deforestation has proven to be challenging. And one of the most popular methods to overcome this challenge is replanting mangroves that have been cut down. Mangrove seedlings are grown in greenhouses and replanted into mudflats along the ocean's edge. Replanted mangroves actually thrive to a greater extent than the mangroves that were there previously, growing quicker and healthier. Hydrological restoration has also shown to be quite effective at increasing Florida's mangrove population. Hydrological pathways are created for mangroves that no longer have access to estuary or lagoon waters. Without access, the salinity in the soil of the mangroves accumulates and of course can cause mangroves to dry out and die. The mangroves act similar to these increasing salt conditions like a water-dependent plant would to a drought. Saline conditions for a mangrove can cause decreased growth rates, decreased gas exchange and transpiration, and increased water efficiency. These hydrological pathways feed into the mangrove forest, causing the salinity to decrease and allowing the mangrove forest to rehydrate and become able to excrete all the excess salt that had accumulated.
So, when it comes to the science aspect of it, there is a lot of effort being made with hydrological restorations occurring and, making sure that these forests are getting the water that they need and so they are able to use it efficiently. Now, while all this is, and what happens when developers all of a sudden want to develop in these areas that, these new mangrove forests are being planted? Or what happens if they want to develop in these sites that are designated for hydrological restoration, in their construction?
That leads me into the next important topic of fixing the issues mangrove forests are facing in Florida by establishing conservation areas dedicated to their preservation. Some of the conservation programs that have been created alone include the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, which implemented the Mangrove Trimming and Preservation Act 96. The Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation is another program, and it allows the public to participate in mangrove preservation in a very proactive way through mangrove adoption. People are able to foster mangroves at a young age, consisting of 1 or 2 leaves, until they reach the adult stage and contain many leaves. When they reach this stage, that is when they will be able to survive in the wild, and at that point they're replanted. When they are ready to be replanted, they take them along the shoreline where most of the deforestation has occurred and attempt to restore the ecosystem there. The Fabian Coastal Ocean Learning Center actually helped restore 35,000 mangroves in Florida, developed model education programs, and created local plans of action. So while there are many issues facing mangrove forests, we are actively conducting invaluable techniques and programs that have effectively counteracted these issues. There of course is still a lot of work to be done, but there are definitely steps towards the right direction.
Unfortunately, friends, it looks like all the time we're going to have for today. We hope that you see Florida mangroves as something different from these crazy looking plants, and you can see them as actually unique and ecologically important. We also hope that you're optimistic that despite everything we've done to Florida mangroves through deforestation and pollution, that there's a lot of work being done to help conserve this species so we can enjoy its benefits for many years to come, because especially since they're critical and endangered at the moment. But we hope that you're optimistic that we have these statutes and these organizations to help protect them. But overall, knowledge is power. Use the knowledge to spread the awareness, support organizations, and just make smarter decisions. Be on the lookout for these Florida mangroves whenever you're traveling around the Florida's recreational areas. Signing off now, I'm Casey. I'm here with my friends Michelly and Melissa. We thank you guys for joining us.